Hello everyone, welcome to Ki Baat and happy Independence Day to everybody, right? Thank you very much for joining this event, and we are going to have an exciting conversation with the host of people out there from the industry. There are experts from all over, from manufacturing to agriculture to IT and to finance, and obviously MSME as well. So we are going to talk about very latest and greatest topic that is talk of the town, at least from the country perspective, India, right? So if you remember, our Prime Minister of India, in his own way of saying "Mitro Deshwasiyon," when he announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat mission, Self-reliant India mission, it was very exciting to hear, and specifically in the wake of this pandemic, it becomes much more important for us to be able to see that how we can help in this mission in whatever capacity we are. For example, if you're in the IT, what can you do to contribute to the entire mission, right? So that's the whole idea. I know it is a big subject and we have only got 2 hours, but we are trying our best to really do justice with the subject. So with that, I'm going to hand over it to Vidya Sagar for inviting our keynote speaker here for today to invite him and then say a few words about this whole subject. So Vidya Sagar, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjeev. Uh, Good evening, everyone, and wish you all a happy Independence Day. Today's keynote speaker is Mr. Babu Unikrishnan. He is Chief Technology Officer for Manufacturing and Utilities Business Group in TCS. And in his role, his focus area is to look at research and innovation in cutting-edge technologies that can be applied to the manufacturing and utilities customers, and how we can come up with new service offering solutions in collaboration with the larger TCS innovation ecosystem. So over to you, Umi. Welcome on board.
All right, thank you, Vidya and Sanjeev, and good evening to everybody. I think it's great to be here with all of you, and also specifically on the occasion of our Independence Day. I think it's quite topical that we look at this conversation or trigger this conversation around importance of data in the context of Atmanirbhar Bharat. I thought from my vantage point, just looking at from different aspects of how this, as Sanjeev said, it's got different shades and aspects of Atmanirbhar Bharat to be kept in consideration. There are different call to action out here. I was particularly excited in the specific call to action around making our domestic sector a world-class with a dual objective. One is to flourish it more from a local standpoint and as well as make a larger impact in the global value chain. So in that context, it's very rightfully placed to complement or encourage the manufacturing and agriculture sector within the country as well. It has got a great potential, as you all know. So I thought I'll bring views around that perspective, around these two sectors, and see how data could play an important role in pushing the envelope further or taking this up to the next level. So let's take an example of agriculture sector. I would just next 5 to 10 minutes, I would try to bring these two sectors to life in terms of how we could look at it from the importance of data-related initiative and solution that would kickstart that progress. So let's take agriculture sector for a moment. As you all know, I think all of us, everybody of us, are significantly impacted by this in one way or the other, directly or indirectly. But there are two capabilities that I believe that are very important as we look ahead. One is in terms of precision farming capabilities. Now it's happening already in pockets, but how do we make it more mainstream in nature? Second is about how do we make a more vibrant data marketplaces to support the agriculture business model itself. Let's spend a bit of time on both of these pointers. First one, more in terms of precision farming. It's all about giving the decision-making capability onto the frontline farmers to make sure that they're able to make the timely decisions. And these could be decisions so that the the outcome is in terms of better crop quality and also better yield around it. Now, how does that happen? It happens in terms of providing certain data-driven decision-making capability, equip the farmers to enable that. This could be in terms of optimal usage of water, optimal usage of pesticides and fertilizers, for instance, or for that matter, even identifying crop damage early in the life cycle. Now, for this to happen, I think it's important that a lot of information need to be crunched together and that insight has to be provided. I'll come to that in a moment. But more importantly, the farmers are really going to get incentivized by the fact that they get this information ahead of time and make more timely decisions around it. On a similar coin, the second point is more of getting more vibrant marketplaces. See, the traditional agri-manufacturing, specifically in India, the business and the marketing model is very much fragmented in nature. There are initiatives being done to get it together, but it's still fragmented in nature. The point is more about enhancing that model to make sure that farmers or the farmer community, larger community, has access to multiple markets, ability to connect with other partners, and ability to connect with other farmers even, so that they could potentially have an ability to discover the price much more transparently and also realize that pricing construct. It's very important to get the right price regime back to the farmers. So this is another area that I believe has a significant impact from the relevance of data and how data bring those information together. So along these 2 pointers, one is on precision farming and the more vibrant marketplaces to be established. Let's see how data could make a difference. Now, these are not the only 2 ones. I mean, there are many other aspects to be considered, but I just thought I'll highlight these 2. Let's look at the data context here. From a data perspective, from a precision farming standpoint, it's all about gathering or sensing data at scale and ensure that insights have been generated out of that. Now, sensing and gathering of data could be in terms of ground sensing. That is very relevant in terms of picking information from ground through physical sensors, or even through crowdsourced sensing. Now, this is very important because in India, a country like India, crowdsourced sensing is very, very relevant. You can have people at scale collecting this information, passing it on, capturing the info through mobiles. So that's another viable scenario as well. Now, once you gather this data, then it's all about processing that again at scale to make sure that you're able to make the right technology interventions. So this is where I think the emerging data-driven technologies, whether it is IoT, machine learning, models which could help in predicting based on this data and get those information. So that has to complement the first gathering and sensing scenario. And then eventually, once you get the data, it's not enough that information stays with you. You need to translate that information all the way through the agriculture value chain, for instance, or the farming value chain. So you should have a very robust data exchange mechanism out here. Let's take an example, whether it's a farm to table or a farm to warehouse. There are many partners, many parties involved in the flow. You know, ensure that there is a open data flow happening around it. So again, the timely decisions can be made. So there are certain steps that are already happening. For instance, food processors organization that the government has launched, which is very much in this direction, getting the fragmented farmer community together. But I think we have to push the envelope in terms of making them more effective in terms of those precision farming capabilities, as well as bringing those marketplaces with the construct. So that's a bit on the agriculture sector. Let me now switch to a bit on the core manufacturing itself. I think it's quite a known fact that manufacturing traditionally has been working in quite silos. Now I'm talking about mainstream manufacturing, not the high-tech manufacturing. The predominant manufacturing construct here. So there, I think it's all about operational efficiency and cost. It's been driven primarily through reasonably efficient and linear supply chain, and a semi-automated, I would call semi-automated, but manually intensive factory floor or shop floor operations. While these are the 2 ones that are driving the focus today, I think the mantra has to change now, especially in the context of self-reliant India, to make it more smart, make it more connected. These 2 things, I think, is very, very important, especially the connectedness part of it. if you were to really look ahead, connectedness would what make a difference here. And connectedness in terms of the multiple moving parts out here, whether it is the on the floor assets, on the shop floor assets, or whether it is the products on the install base that is on the field, and even the processes that are deployed. Today, they are very disparate. They're not connected well enough. So I think that the three levels of connectivity that we should be looking at. When I say connectivity, it's essentially getting the data tied together across these moving parts. One is in terms of within the enterprise of a manufacturing organization. This could be connectivity in the context of a machine-to-machine connectivity on the shop floor, or machine-to-cloud connectivity. Now, with more and more proliferation of cloud-based processing, that's another important aspect. And it's also about connecting the IT and OT system that is very commonly known in manufacturing parlance. You have an OT system and the IT system, which rarely talk to each other today. So that need to be connected to get a broader holistic picture. So one is in terms of within the enterprise. Second is about extending that to the broader enterprise or extended enterprise, which includes customers, the end customer. So whether it is a business to business or even a business to consumer, the B2B2C, which is kind of picking up. And India is definitely one of the focus area for that because of a vibrant end consumer community out there. So if you look at both the scenarios, it's very important to get that connectivity established because that drives some kind of new business model that would come in this space. You might have heard about servitization, which is more of as a service model that are coming in the manufacturing sector. So that's going to be a determining factor going forward. So you no more buy a product, you buy a service. You let the consumer take it as a service. So you don't buy a car tire, you buy a tire as a service. You pay for the miles and kilometers that it would support as you move forward. You don't buy a printer as a product, you buy printing as a service. The number of printing copies that it will be able to deliver you. So to get to that kind of model change, I think it's important data connectivity is established in all response. And the final one is also bringing more intelligence at the edge. So this is an interesting thing. I think globally it started happening around, but in slow and steady world, we need to embrace that as well. This is more of making the edge in a factory construct, and edge could be different interpretations out here. For an example, it could be the end of an assembly line. How do I make more intelligence out there? Say, for instance, quality inspections at the end of the line. It's important to make that quick decisioning and not necessarily a manual intensive operation out there. Using techniques like AI vision, techniques like high-end analytics to make sure that you identify the patterns to determine damages upfront. See, these are imperatives that would help in the process to make us more effective in the global scene as well. For instance, elevating the product quality, or for that matter, better brand recognition. So that's pretty much in the manufacturing sector, which I believe it's a lot about data connectivity, getting this whole thread together, and then making those intelligence at the edge as well. Now, it's not an overnight journey out here. It has to go through steps around it, but the more early we embrace this thinking, the technologies that would make a help here and ability to connect the data, I think we get there a lot faster. Now, one common denominator you would have, with these two sectors in mind, one common denominator that you would have recalled is around data sharing. I've been insistently saying data sharing between multiple parties here, between manufacturers and the customers, between organizations and organizations, especially if they're in a similar supply chain or a value chain, and between organizations and the consumer, the end consumer. So these three different ways of data sharing has to be very effectively handled. If you look at it, it's quite analogous to what banking and financial services kind of set the traction around open banking. It's been kind of picking up traction globally. It's hit India as well. Open banking is all about connecting or triangulating three parties together: the consumer, the financial services provider, and the third-party partner. In most cases, they are the startups or the fintechs, which provide that additional insider information. Connecting them together to get better transparency of information, better choices to the end consumer. So there is a similar kind of a construct that is evolving out here as well. And I could go on and on, talk about more examples, but I thought I'll just set the context with these two scenarios to me, there are really immense possibilities out here. It's only limited to the our level of imagination that we wanted to do around this. But at the same time, let me also say that it's important that we take a pragmatic step at it. We don't want to boil the whole ocean out here. So, what are those steps and what are those medium to long term models that we need to work through? Because there are certain foundational changes also need to happen. So, I thought I'll leave 2 or 3 such thoughts around it to trigger a further conversation as part of this keynote, so that it just kind of set the ball rolling. I think it's very important for us to look at embracing data-driven emerging technologies. It's important that we understand the importance and usage of that at scale. It cannot be happening in pockets at scale. And for that to happen, we need to start that culture a lot more at the grassroots level. Educational system itself has to embrace that a lot more. We need to ensure our industry workforce are equipped to understand this changing technology angle. So that's one important thing, whether it's machine learning, artificial intelligence, IoT, cybersecurity, few of them which are very converged will make the desired impact, has to be embraced a lot more faster and a lot more at scale. Second is I would call open data. I think it's important to define the constructor on open data. How do you exchange the data across different parties? What's the modality of that? For instance, when you exchange the data, one important thing to note it out is about consents. What does that mean about a consent-driven data management? You would see more and more consent-driven data processing as the way to move forward. Policies around it, governance around it. There could be an oversight from regulatory angle also that need to be set in if we to really take that way through. And the last is about those marketplaces. I think it's important to establish, because that's where the rubber hit the road. You make an impact because you need to get those parties together. But what about getting those information to reality? So monetization policies around it. So these three, to me, I thought would, there are many more that we could talk about, but I thought the embracing data-driven emerging technologies, then about marketplaces, establishing those, we need that environment and support and the construct to enable that. And then, of course, open data as a construct, as a standard that would establish around it. So that's what I thought. I would just set the tone for opening remark around it. I'm sure as we do more and more of this, we naturally would get a step closer to the Atmanirbhar mantra, the concept, and make our local sectors flourish more locally, as well as make that impact in the global value chain as well. So with that, let me hand it over back to you, Sanjeev. I thought the construct, which you were just saying, you could piggyback from that. But some of the thoughts around it, as you said, you can't do justice on this topic. It's such a huge topic out here. But I just wanted to give a few views around what's possibly emerging in this space and what we need to keep note of it on a very accelerated note.
Thank you, Unnikrishnan. So this is excellent. I think the takeaways that if you can, we all can take is, I picked up like data economy. I mean, in a way, you talked about data monetization. We talked about open data culture and how the sharing can be established between the entities, right? Those modalities, and then you also talked about how the infrastructure overall, basically how they should interact between each other is one of those aspects. You touched upon the very key topic, and for that we have obviously one of the person invited here out there on agri tech basically. So that's going to be interesting to see the other side of the insights and comments over there. That's going to be taking place in the next call. So I would like to kick off this discussion where we all can participate with the. I'll try to play a devil's advocate here in terms of when we are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is self-reliant India, and at the same time we are talking about globalization. We are talking about a lot of FDI investment. We are talking about open economy. At the same time, we are now telling that we want to be self-reliant. So doesn't this sound contradictory to all of us? Because there is a lot of debate already happening around that, and I thought I'll start with that, so that we kind of get into the subject. At the same time, we have the expert from each industry. We have Ganga from finance, we have Sagar from MSME, we have enterprise architect, a couple of them like Vidya Sagar and Jazz, and we have agri-tech business expert as well from every side, Venki, and we have Soumya, who is like you talked about data privacy to some extent. I know it is controversial subject, but yeah, data governance, how are different data related regulations can help. So with that, I would like to start from Venki, because your talk only really touched on those agricultures more, and we know that as an Indian, right, we understand it's the backbone of our country, and that's where I'm correcting. It's not that I don't want to hear the other perspective. We all want to, but so Venki, over to you to kick this off. But remember that devil advocate that I just played. Why we are talking about both the contrasting things.
Sure. It's interesting you bring this this devil's advocate, because even I was going to also play the same role here. Because see, I mean, there are two ways to be a skeptic. One is a skeptic who is not really aware of what is happening, and probably who's just going to diss ideas. But the other idea is also to be a skeptic who is very genuinely concerned, as in the thick of things, and is wanting to challenge. So I belong to the latter school. When we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think the five pillars, as is officially has been defined, talks a lot about infrastructure. And so fundamentally, when we talk about the role of data, I think first point that I would really like to clarify is data privacy is not a controversial subject. Data privacy is a fundamental infrastructure right. And I think the need to see data as an infrastructure is a very key element. And that is something that I have, I'll probably touch upon when I talk about the agriculture side. See, broadly, when it comes to specifically with respect to agriculture, today I see there are almost like three players here, right? There is first the corporations, there is then the government, and then there is the individual farmer. Now, among these three players, you have the entire data that is flowing in, and any discussion around data in the role of data in agriculture has to involve all these three. Now, what happens is the way the industry is, there is a big government influence there. And today, if you really go back to the history of, we were a country that was, until the 60s, we were worried about food scarcity. We were worried about situations, and so we had to bring in technologies imported from US. So today you will see this also in the fundamentally the way the data collection process is also structured. So fundamental to the role of data is understanding how the data is coming in, and I think that's the one key area fundamental I would also want to look at. So today, largely, if you look at the way our central statistical organization is structured, or the way NSSO is being constructed, all of them rely on a data process that dates back to the original approach which PC Mahalanobis started in the 60s. And that approach was very well suited for the command and control economy, which was a hark back to the socialist times. But in a market economy times, our data structures, in the way we collect, especially gather public data, that is not still has come up to the times. I'll give you a very specific example. So today, if you talk about two different key sources in defining, in collecting in the data that is getting generated about agriculture, one is NSSO, which is National Statistical Sample Survey data, and the other is NABARD, right? Now, interestingly, both have two different definitions of a farmer. So in NABARD has a definition of a farmer where a farmer has an agriculture produce of 5,000, that's a lower cutoff, then he becomes a farmer. Whereas for NSSO, it is 3,000. So we haven't really arrived at a clear understanding of what the fundamental definitions of these sources there. So I would really want to look back at the fundamentals of, before we talk about precision agriculture or we talk about data marketplace, the fundamental element is data, because garbage in, garbage out, So we need to really look at how are we defining the data? And I think that's one key aspect that, we have still not yet evolved in. I mean, it's great. We should talk about data marketplaces and we should talk about the transparency of data, because, the other aspect here is farmer data is not equivalent to consumer data. Farmer data, a farmer is running his own proprietary business, and so it should be equally treated as a proprietary business data. But But the way we are defining these fundamental definitions and the way we are defining the ontology, all of these play a huge role. So in a nutshell, I think we need to focus on the fundamentals, and that fundamental starts with defining the data and how are we defining the data. So I think that's the first step. I would really want to bring that as an emphasis there. But I'm happy to take any questions that you guys may have on the points that I talked about.
Yep, and I'll just touch upon this and guide the further conversation. And as you rightly said, and me being in a position where I can just relate it with the taxonomy, the metadata definition of my understanding of certain things versus your understanding of certain things. So that takes me to the back to the data governance piece of it, and for which I think I have Soumya who would probably want to jump in, because he has done a lot of work in the this time of the world where we are dealing with pandemic and COVID-19, and it has changed the entire perspective of how do we treat the data, the definition of it, and all of those aspects. So cataloging, metadata management, so that we understand the meaning and everybody understand who is the farmer, what is the definition of farmer, like you rightly said, right? So those kind of a thing touches the data governance piece of it. So Soumya, you would like to give some thought quickly on that, and then we can take it from there.
Yes, Sanjeev, thank you so much for that. Hope you all can hear me okay. Oh, like great. Hey, I think Venki, it was a great point you actually touched base, right? When we do the data governance initiatives, the first thing which we all try to understand is, let's go ahead and define our data. And probably prior to that, let's see who is defining the data. And probably before we go to the why, let's talk about who, right? So that's where, like Sanjeev mentioned, people and metadata management, we are understanding our own data will come into the play. Now, given that particular context, when we implement data governance, these are the three key pillars we try to identify, right? Hey, let's go ahead and identify, first of all, why are we doing it, and who are part of this entire program, who is responsible to do it. Let's go ahead and define the data at that particular period. Now, taking us back into that context and connecting back to Atmanirbhar Bharat and the two examples you have given, hey, we fundamentally don't have a closure on how we define a farmer is, right? I believe that's where our glossaries will come into the play. When an enterprise like Unni mentioned earlier, they are doing a lot of R&D in a variety of ways, making sure that they connect the enterprises with the consumers in a structured format. That's where another challenge comes in. I think he also echoed on it, which is the DSAs, your data sharing agreements. Now you are collecting a lot of information, and no one knows who is governing it, or we might not be governing it. Then there should be a mechanism in play. And there was also a point you have mentioned earlier to that, where data privacy might not be the key here. And I will probably defer to that definition, wherein data privacy plays a key role. At times, the state's role in while you're capturing the information. Take COVID-19 as a simple example, right? So I'll take from where I live right now and what I see and how it is actually evolving across the United States or in the European nations. So whether you agree or you give your consent or you do not give your consent, if you are visiting a hospital, as simple as that, right? They have every right to collect your PIIs, of course, which they generally do it when they run your PAN card or use social security numbers. They'll have all that info. But apart from it, they're also requesting your personal information, dating back to the last 9 months, right? So that's a kind of trend going on. Now, are you comfortable sharing all that information, and are we not comfortable? That's a debate altogether. But do you have a fundamental right to decline it? Yes, you do. But do they have a fundamental right to decline your request and enforce you to take it? I would say not, right? So this is a debating point. Now I'll imply the same thing into our conversation when we are collecting all this metadata and we're trying to make decisions based on the governed metadata. Now somebody has to come in and define what is metadata for you at your enterprise and what is a metadata from a consumer point of view, and make sure that we take right decisions probably based on
so
it.
coming back to
So that's something,
No,
but we will.
I was saying that
Yeah, go ahead,
when you talked
Sanjeev.
about the defining piece, right, and looking at all the industry here, it's not about agriculture. We can also look at banking and finance as well. We can look at MSME as well, and also in our world as an IT, person looking at the data very closely. We day in day face out that there is some tribal knowledge in the head of people, and it's not going to, it's not coming out. And when we are trying to deal and decide and work on certain solution, because the whole idea of Atmanirbhar with data is what, when I coined this whole thing, the whole idea was that how can data be an enabler? I'm not saying it's the only thing, right? There are a lot many things out there, but when
Right.
it comes to the industry, right, how is that being done over there, like in the banking sector, Sagar, in your MSME sector, right? Because there may be a lot of unstructured way of handling things, because it's MSME for that matter, right? It's not a big enterprise. There may be a lot of IT system may not be there as well. So how do we make sure that these definitions are in place so that we can understand that context better, and then look at the solution or look at the improvement of certain solution, and that helps into the people, in terms of how they can get benefited from the government program itself. For example, I was reading one of the article, SD Kamath was talking about this new definition of MSME. That itself is a one more definition that we are bringing in. So I'm not sure, Shagar, if you are aware of that, but from the MSME perspective, what do you think that can be done differently to contribute to this whole initiative? Sagar, over to you.
So before going on to defining MSME, while we are talking about the data collection and the data science, I would from a MSME perspective, because I
Right.
see the points presented are more from the IT perspective or from a person who is actually working on the data.
Correct.
But let me put out a question to all of us together here, that MSME is actually running with shorter funds right now. So is it required for all the MSMEs to go for a high-tech digital transformation or a data transformation journey, or they can also apply simple transformations using the available technology, which is like simple Excel? I mean, I come from a manufacturing industry where my workforce is not even able to enter the data from the shop floor to the Excel, because they're not educated, but they are highly skilled. They are super skilled, but it comes to a challenging point where they can't enter the data. So a fundamental thing like defining MSME, either it's 25 crores, 50 crores, or 500 crores, or this bunch of people will come under MSME. The point here is, are we understanding the point where MSME stands right now? Today with COVID, as we all understand, the pandemic has actually destroyed or changed the way MSME used to work. The financials is completely shattered. The liquidity has completely shattered. So how do we look up to that? Because defining MSME is not a concern here. I mean, as far as I come from MSME, my concern is, how can I bring data transformation journey at a very cost effective level, rather than making it a big fuss out there.
That's a great point, because as I said, it's not a big enterprise, but they also got to probably make their process much more efficient, and do their operations in a way that it is cost effective, and all of those aspects, right? So that's where I think that the whole idea of how can we use this to the benefit, when we really look at small improvement, like using the data to the benefit of your daily operations. And I think, Sagar, in one of our show earlier that we did, right, we talked about a simple ways of looking at the value stream mapping exercise. That okay, from my process from A to B, what all happens, and what are the different value added things and different non-value added stuff, and can we not minimize that, and then take it from take it and see that how we can improve the process with simple methods, right? So those are the key aspect that of looking at it. But I also saw in the overall pillars, right, there is a lot of financial aid that is being granted to the MSMEs. What is the role of So obviously, government has done what they could do. They have said that okay, they are going to grant say 20,000 crore or 20 lakh crore is what
No,
I heard that.
it's a 50,000 crore equity infusion for MSME growth through
Yes.
funds.
No,
Yeah.
overall, this Atmanirbhar Bharat, when our Prime Minister announced, it was 20 crore, 20 lakhs crore is
20
what,
lakh crores.
yeah, what the number was, right? So looking at that piece, government probably has done that announcement, right? Now, what is the, and obviously, Ganga, I'm coming back to you on that, right? From the banking and finance sectors, what is the role of now the financial institution is going to be to make sure that those are expedited or those are made very easy so that the benefit can reach wherever it is allocated to. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure, Sanjeev. See, I guess actually you mentioned a little while ago about what is exactly the MSME, and Sagar said too. It's not about the definition. That's really immaterial. It is whether at this sector, and I recommend, like you mentioned an article by Mr. Kamath, I would recommend a book by Professor Vaidyanathan called India Unink. And most of the corporates are not really the top 500. They easily get equity, they get funds, they get a little more than what everybody else put together gets. But the MSMEs, the SMEs, and the micro MSMEs, they just don't get the funds in spite of the best intentions. So, actually, India lies in its MSMEs. So the point is, I mean, I've heard like, what Uni mentioned starting off as, industry 4.0 manufacturing, and we have got like, micro irrigation and, precision irrigation and others. Everything, all of that put together along with MSMEs, what banking is actually does is it's really a lead indicator. So, it needs to assess the credit worthiness of these, like industry 4.0, there is a banking 4.0, banking is necessary, but not a bank. So there are so many algorithms which actually monetize the data, but most of this is focused towards a individual's preferences, whether at all he or she needs a consumer durable or an iPhone. The focus is not really a lot on MSMEs. Yes, there are marketplaces. Yes, there is peer-to-peer lending. I know a bunch of fintechs which use limited data but does very good analytics. Sagar mentioned, right? There are a lot of skilled people, but we don't have how much these people can actually generate in terms of productivity. That is where it comes into picture. That is where unstructured data needs to come in. It needs to enter into a banking algorithm for banks to do justice and actually kind of MSMEs qualify as a part of balance sheet lending. That is something there is a long way to go, in my view. Agricultural lending, many banks buy it out because it is priority sector. There is a mental that is an NPA anyway. Nobody goes to a marginal farmer, tries to assess whether at all this Rabi crop or Kharif crop is actually generating enough revenue to actually pay back the loan. It's too expensive. Okay. So what they do is they take a bet saying that, look, this third party has actually generated assets. We will buy it off and we will show it to RBI. I'm not being cynical. What I'm saying is, if data is actually available to the mainstream banking system, the motivation at currently to monetize this data for consumer lending can go towards agri lending, can go towards manufacturing lending, can go towards MSME lending. So that is the importance of data. I mean, and it is there. Not that it is not there. The incentive, the return, the risk return, reward ratios are actually skewed towards something else. Okay. So, I mean, why do you want to actually put in your balance sheet at risk when you know that the consumer default in India is close to 0.01%, whereas agri default is like close to 15% across the states because we still rely on rains and MSMEs. Just a small change in a government policy can actually change everything. China decides to produce something cheap. That's it. An MSME, an entire industry can actually go out of business. So these are the things which need to be done. And a lot of banks are already doing it. I would not just say banks, I would say financial institutions too. I would say fintechs too. Okay. Mostly the fintechs who are very motivated to make a difference. They focus on those areas which are unattended. Again, coming back to the main part of data, because we're speaking about how data can enable it. So there needs to be a way in which data can be collated, and government alone cannot be doing that. It has to be a private public partnership. There are enough and more APIs, they are dated. I think it was mentioned before that some of these are so old and the definitions itself don't exist, but there are ways in which farmers can know what their goods are. I mean, ITC has got a chowpal. It's taken them forever to actually kind of put it in place. So price discovery is happening. So banks also know which customer is actually type of farmer can, this type of farmer can actually kind of pay back pay back the money taken. So there are improvements being made, but I would say that there is really a long way in the direction. So I mean, and we speak a lot about data localization. I get worried a lot. Central bank has actually given guidelines, but the algorithms reside with the foreign players. I mean, I don't think that just by saying that our data belongs to us, we are doing ourselves a favor. Because until and unless we actually have got the process and the technology in place to actually monetize, this data, benefit, the overall set of needy people, I would not say that just being our data, being ourselves,
So
is not going to help.
So do you see
These are my
yeah,
happy to
that's a really interesting points you brought. Really, also the aspect of farmers, taking the loan and then nobody kind of cares whether they can pay, what happened to their crops, and there is a lot of suicide. I think Venki can probably vouch for that. He's very very closely working on that area, but all of those are happening. So there is a lot of provision into the Atmanirbhar Bharat as well, for making sure that there is a good care taken for that. But you also brought one interesting point, that just because one country can produce some cheap stuff, dump into our market, and our market gets impacted. So are we so vulnerable about this whole aspect that we do not, I mean, we are not able to curb that whole piece, and it is impacting our whole economy, and maybe a small scale industries are going really down because of that, and that's where this Atmanirbhar Bharat came. But does this mean that we will not be open to the trade, or we will not probably do business with the international community? Right? We are not going to do that. Then what is that we can do so that we can make a decision, obviously with the help of data, that okay, this is one item that I want to manufacture in India because it's going to be cheaper, but the other item might cost me a lot of money in producing, so hence let's import it. So those kind of decision making can only be happening with the data, right? Aren't we all agreeing about that? And that's where I'm seeing that we can, and IT, or all the industry expert out here can think from that perspective and help here. So what are general thought on that aspect? Yeah.
If you're asking me, I would say, yeah, okay. I absolutely say that. You mentioned about, to my example, SMEs add value in a part of the business. They're a cog in a big wheel. So because of natural resources, labor arbitrage, currencies, if at all it becomes uncompetitive, yes, it is uncompetitive. So yes, I mean, India or its manufacturing should focus on those core competencies where there is a natural advantage. We did very well in technology. We are doing well in pharma. True, both of them are reverse engineering. Maybe they are not really kind of deep, kind of incorporated technologies per se, but we are doing well in it. There is a cost advantage. My view would be focus on those where there is sustainability, where there is scale, where any difference whatsoever may happen worldwide shouldn't actually be affecting its sustainability and continuity. Easier said than done, but at least there should be some bit of an effort in that direction. And you may about relevance of data in that. See, when somebody sets up an SME, I have seen that, having been in risk and giving loans to a lot of SMEs and MSMEs, there's a lot of passion behind it. It's an entrepreneur with an idea, not somebody in middle management in a large corporate where it's very well oiled. So, and these they're very passionate about. They would like to make a difference. The idea actually give them all the context necessary, whether that idea is correct or not. So that's something which data can enable.
Right.
And very complex, and I would say it's very long term, but we should make a start on that. We should certainly make a start.
Right. So yeah, that's a great context. Data can help making those right decision that okay, whether I should give loan or not, or how viable is the idea, and how that particular product and why it should be manufactured versus imported and all of those aspects. From the technology perspective, I think we have Vidya Sagar, enterprise architect, and then obviously Jess, right? And both of you, right? What are your thoughts purely from technology perspective that how things can be different and it can be enabled for this whole idea of using data for the benefit of social good or public good?
So yeah, that's definitely a good question, right? So far, I think what we discussed, at least to make it better, right? So on some of these SMMEs, the goal is we should be able to enable it for the lesser price, right? And at the same time have the better quality, and also have or best utilize all the infrastructure in depth so that you would be having right visibility to your business. So in that context, I want to take one of the other example, right? So at least if you see it recently, we know, right? So in the pandemic situation, China could able to quickly come out even when it was having such a broader issue out there, right? So that means basically it well utilized the technology. So in my view, it's basically where we are currently is one aspect, but to go to the next level, definitely with respect to the IT and as well as on the technology side, India is playing a big role, right? So in that context, we definitely need to understand if you see it in the context of 5G, right? So and edge technologies, there are many funds are coming to Reliance, right? So and basically many of the companies are trying to invest in our Indian organizations. So basically, the goal is there are few aspects where India is doing a critical business, and we need to understand where we are very strong and influence all of our MSMEs to take advantage of the key areas where India is doing a lot better, right? And focus on that and try to come to the next level. So in that context, I have few thoughts, right? So for example, one aspect is with the 5G, how could you enable your edge computing? And mobile phone itself have the more intelligence and whether it is a agricultural aspects or financial, right? So you try to have more insights of your data and at the same time try to analyze what really the consumers are looking from your business perspective, right? So using various technologies. So basically, there are 2 points. One is use the latest technologies that are coming up, and then at the same time take the help of the cloud-related technologies, right? Once if you place your data in the cloud, definitely we discussed there are a few points where the data governance and kind of privacy-related questions would come up, but if you separate the whole data into 2 parts, the confidential data versus a generic data, right? So there's a lot more percentage, in my view, at least 80% of the regular data is also available when you separate it out from the confidential, right? So take advantage of the non-confidential data and use the cloud computing, right? So which is near to your data centers, and if you see it now, it's very nominal, right? So you could be able to get a huge processing power just in order of right, so thousands of the rupees. It's not even in the lakhs, right? So you don't need to build up your complete infrastructure inside your organization or inside your enterprise. Rather, you just loan the required capacity that you needed and take advantage of your edge computing and place your data over there, come up with the better insights and go for the next level, right? So probably that is how where we could take advantage of various technologies here.
Great point. I think one that I'm taking away as a key, here is that how to utilize the non-personal data, and you are very apt and timely, just that very recently, Government of India has, come up with a report which talks about not the personal data production, which was published, in 2018, and still under consideration. It's not approved yet, but it is all about non-personal data, which you in your way said non-confidential data, and how to use that data for the social and public good. And I see a lot of connection. I mean, that basically one of those topics triggered this thought in me that definitely we cannot imagine this kind of a transformation and self-reliant without the use of those data, which should be publicly available. Obviously, I'm not saying that we all should just access it and whoever comes they get it. There has to be control in place, but it has to be regulated and governed so that whoever needs it can use it. Right? It cannot be only with the Facebook and Googles of the world. It should be with the maybe a startup who really wants that, because they don't have advantage of early entrant. Google and Facebook has been from a long time and they got the bigger chunk of data. But now we are talking about inspiring people or companies to come up with the new ideas. Like one of the questions that came up here is that how can we create design thinking, use of AML, and then innovative thought process. So what do you think that we can probably propose for this, unless we make the data available? If the data is not available, and if it is only given to certain companies and people, and it is not democratized, I don't think there can be any innovation in place. What are your thoughts on this question from Mahesh Kumar, BC? When we were chatting about this, anybody I think can talk about that. I added my thought there.
Yeah, sure, Sanjeev. Vidyasagar here. Let me take that question. And your previous question also, you asked about enterprise architecture. I will try to kill many birds at one shot based on some of the comments I kill. See, one of the things that we have to look at is there is no doubt that IT is very much inside our lives. We have seen that. In fact, the very role that IT is playing, we are all in this event. We should agree. And the infrastructure or the foundation has to come from enterprise architecture. In fact, it is not when you say enterprise, it is not enterprise as a company, but as a country. So India is the first country in the world, I am really proud to say, that has launched an enterprise architecture model called IND-EA. And World Bank and World Economic Forum are telling all the other countries, see, if a country like India can do enterprise architecture at a country level, why you guys cannot do that? So that framework is available. And now, how to put that to action? We have seen during the pandemic time, when the series of relief measures were being announced by finance minister, and there were questions on how do you have the data. In fact, we have seen that everybody failed to understand how many migrant labor we have, and so much of crisis has unfolded. Had government had a clue about this, probably they would have taken a more human approach to ensure that they will not just get onto a road and just call for a lockdown without anything. So the problem is lack of data, and enterprise architecture is one dimension. I am not saying that that's the only dimension. And for a federated country like India, where the constitution also has certain aspects which are controlled by the central government, some by state, and there is a area where both central government and state government have jurisdiction. So that's where is conflict. So if you have a enterprise architecture provides a federated IT backbone, which will help in actually creating that database, and you can draw insights. So the challenge now is you do not even have a way to collect the data. And we have seen instances. So for example, I read one news article in Kerala where government had distributed a lot of money and food and other things to be distributed to the migrants. And there are migrants who did not know that government was giving that, and they were not able to get this benefit, and the goods that were there for the migrants, it was rotting in the godowns. So that is the state of affairs. So if you are able to connect these, so what I see is enterprise architecture provides a valid foundation to look at that. So once you have that in place, you can use anything on the data. So it can be using artificial intelligence, machine learning techniques, or anything. But first, we need to look at thinking, and then the next step is design thinking. So when you don't have common sense itself, then there is no point in really looking at design thinking aspects. That is what is my take on this.
Perfect. So, and there is one announcement that I wanted to make. It is a great day for enterprise architect today. Today our Prime Minister has announced a national digital health mission, and it is based upon the architecture just that Vidyasagar talked about. It is called in India Enterprise Architecture Framework. So it is a really a great day for all the architects out there because that has become a base for this new policy or new framework from Government of India, which is National Digital Health Mission. It's a great thing, and it is completely based upon the Indian National Enterprise Architecture Framework. So that's a great, thought process there, Vidyasagar, and it's like, people are calling it a dream come true, and there is a, lot of opportunity to use this same architecture to other industries like, maybe, agriculture or finance or, wherever so possible.
Yeah.
So that's a great one.
So one more point, actually, I would like just to comment is the storage part, actually, because he's an expert on storage. So I think if you have a question, that is fine. Otherwise, I would like just to actually comment on the storage point, because we are not leveraging his expertise on that. So just any comments on that, or if you have specific question, Sanjeev, you can address to Jess right now on the storage part, because
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate.
Yeah.
I mean, Jess can probably add more, but if you really think the infrastructure that we are talking about, if you do not capture the data at source, and if you do not have a way to pipeline it and store it and make it available, that's not going to help. So storage is critical, and I know Jess' expertise in that area, more of the storage and all. So yeah, Jess, if you have any thought-provoking inputs to that and how this can be leveraged, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jessica and Sanjeev. So let me add a few comments on that. Definitely, we all know data is critical. So now the next step is, how do you manage this data, right? So how do you store it? And on top of it, how could you infer it? And with your inferencing, how could you come up different models so that you could improve your business and go for the next level, right? Definitely, these are all different questions. So in that context of all the period, we definitely evolve the technology in a greater way. So both in the context of enterprise management and as well as the ease of management. So in that context, one of the fundamental starting point would be the software-defined storage. In the sense, say, as we are talking a huge enterprise aspects here, in the sense when you're talking about the overall the government sector level, right? So there are various sectors that come up under the government, right? Like you see the agricultural or different financial aspects, right? So definitely the volume of data that would be getting huge. So now the question comes up: how could you rightly manage it? In the sense, on particular time frame, maybe if it is Rabi or Kharif, right? So where actually you are doing, or where actually you started your process during that time, the information of the data that you get could be huge. Whereas once the crops are finishing up, or if it's in the final stage, probably the data that would be generating is less, right? It is possible you are moving from your supply chain perspective, you finished your farming kind of aspects and probably are going to the next level into the godowns or customers, right? So you're basically in your supply chain, you're moving to some other sector. So basically, what I mean to say is every industry has need to look for at what particular time you would be getting a huge data, and probably the pace of data which you are getting is always not the constant, right? So it could be huge at some times, and over the period, right? So in a year, it could change. So now we need a data storage mechanism which could adapt your dynamic requirements. In the sense, in one data, probably you could have, right, so a single day, you could go up to the 50 TB or 100 DB, 100 terabytes or even petabytes. And probably in some other day, it could come down maybe in the order of just gigabytes, right? So in a sense, so basically, we need to adapt and our system need to be capable of handling their dynamic alignment. So in that context, definitely, I think software-defined storage would definitely helpful, where right, so you could focus on the variations and identifying it on the fly, and make sure the end user won't be really affected how much data and how much storage you are dynamically creating for the user, right? So that is one
Okay.
aspect. And at that, please go ahead.
Yeah, one
Any
question
question?
that came up here is, yeah, I mean, I think it's a user, who is online over there and talking about domain-based, domain-driven data, basically, what I thought he meant. So here we have a domain expert out here. I mean, finance, I keep saying MSME, agriculture, right? So I'll go back to, anyone else who really want to talk about how how is data different in, say, for example, agriculture, as compared to, because I personally have not experienced looking at agriculture data, and I would be much more interested. I have seen finance data, I have seen MSME data and data governance and all. I know that. Obviously, storage, yes, from your point. So, Venki, do you have any thought on how the data in agriculture is different than anything else? Just to give us a perspective and how it can be used for the benefit of our core. This is a core to India, right? Agriculture is core to us. So, any thoughts on that? And just I will get back to you on
Sure.
that, storage piece.
Sure. So before I get to the point, I just want to also throw a little bit of a spanner in the works, like because we have a session on data and we have a group of techies here, I just, want to be cautious of, not prematurely deciding that data is the, because the session is on data, the problem is obviously more data. And what's more data, we build more solutions. That becomes like a recursive circular loop, and that doesn't generally often happen, right? So, I just wanted to bring that bit of caution that not oftentimes, it's the lack of data that is causing problems. I'll give you a classic example in agriculture. In agriculture, we have been collecting a lot of data, and most of the technologies are also available for making agriculture profitable. But still, there has been a lot of challenges. So obviously, there are structural aspects there, and structural aspects in the way the market is designed, which makes it very difficult for the farmers to access a good share of the markets. So I just wanted to throw that bit of air of caution here in terms of not really taking data as the panacea here, because there are far more. See, ultimately, you asked me about how farmer data is different. Like, typically farmer data. I'll give you maybe a classic scenario here. Maybe that case study might really be of helpful. So last year in 2019 around, there was a case about in the US where this company called Climate Corporation, and they had a data partnership agreement with this company called Tillable View. And this partnership, had a lot of challenges for farmers, where farmers were complaining about that the data from the Climate View, what Tillable View is a startup that was into renting, and it primarily looked at the rental agreements between between the different lands and how they can optimize it. And so some of the farmers started complaining that their data was going into Climate View, and although there was not an explicit data sharing agreement, but it turned out that the license agreement between the two parties and the privacy agreement had a lot of discrepancy in terms of the way the terms were defined. So it's very important for us to really understand the fact that information is politics. Okay, and each of us, data doesn't exist without in a non-political realm. So obviously, any person who is going to say that I'm going to be productive, I mean, this has been the standard narrative. If you talk in agriculture, they'll say the systems we don't have, we are not productive. Let's make it productive. But at the end of the day, anyone who is trying to make a productive, some kind of a productive system is trying to enforce his way of organizing the data. So the question here is who is organizing the data, and what is his objective in terms of bringing the certain level of productivity there. So I mean, I just want to throw in a little bit of politics there, because it seems like, going by the conversation we are having, it seems like, once we bring in all the data, things are going to be rosy, which is not the case, in the both in the history and in the
Yeah, it
present.
is not the case. Yep,
And
yep,
and, and, and to
definitely it is
also
not.
to another point, we talked about the MSME in terms of data, but think about it. Most of
Right.
the MSMEs have lost their jobs, have lost their entrepreneurship. A lot of businesses have been killed when big companies became monopolies, right? In the early days of Microsoft, we all know what happened to small startups. And right now, even with data, it favors data. Data has the winner takes all approach. In that case, MSMEs won't even able to survive. So how are we going to put a check on the data when we are talking about managing the data with respect to ensuring that MSMEs can survive in the first place?
No,
Yes,
Sanjeev, I would just like to
thank you.
add a point
Yeah,
here.
please. I was coming to you only. Yeah, please.
No problem.
Yeah,
So, see, we heard two of our panelists talk about, data, MSME, and being productive. So, being a productivity explorer that I talk about, I would just like to highlight one simple fact, which is not very relevant out there. Productivity is efficiency multiplied by effectiveness. Most of the time, when we talk about productivity, it's always related to how efficient we are, how faster we produce, how much can we produce. What about the quality? Because if I'm producing 1,000 pieces, if 60 pieces are rejected, I'm losing out on productivity. So productivity is not only efficiency, but it's also effectiveness of your process in getting out the right quality product. And that is where data has to help a lot, is because as we started the discussion, we talked about the communication from the market, communication from the quality, communication from the dispatch, back to the process, back to the engineers. The same way we talk about MSME now, the funds, the politics, the data not reaching or the money not reaching MSME is not productive, is because the efficiency of the system is there. They are announcing everything on internet, but it's not effective, is because the money is not reaching the MSME. Now, as Venki rightly said, in our own sector, in automotive, Sanjeev, there will be more than 25% MSMEs which will go bankrupt because of the 4 months disturbance in their supply chain, because of 4 months disturbance in their manufacturing output, because all the MSMEs are right now running at 30% capacity. 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, 30% capacity, which means they have run 1 month production over 3 months. The incoming is 30 days payment terms, 60 days payment terms, and 90 days payment terms. In what way is the MSME going to be alive after 6 months for him to get even Atmanirbhar, or for him to get the money that are being sanctioned to him? And that's the most concern, or that's the real concern that we all need to talk about. We are going to become Atmanirbhar with what? Atmanirbhar for whom?
Absolutely, great point. I will just add few things here. Sagar, very good, thought over there. And also what Venki also mentioned, uh, which is a core topic of discussion elsewhere, which is when the government of India talked about this data democratization. Because of the big company monopoly, this digital divide, what is happening is that the it is at the discretion of the big players, and it is not being really served. It's not serving the bottom line well. In this case, when I say about small scales industry, MSME, or anybody who wants to create a solution, come up with some kind of innovation to create a difference in existing solutions so that it will be much more effective or efficient. And that's where this thought of regulating that data has come into the picture. And there is lot of debate around it. I will still say that it's ongoing process, but we are really doing the right discussion and talking on the right point, that if the data is not you collected and stored, how are you leveraging that to the benefit, and who is able to access it when they need it? And that's where the whole challenge is, and that's where this regulation is required. And unless we have that, only the class will get benefit, and not the aam janta, as we call, right? In this case, farmer, or maybe a middle class segment, which is like more in India, right? So that's where the idea of making this democratize more, making it available more, and all of those came into the picture. And that's a great topic of discussion. For the loan, and then how the money is not reaching, I would defer to Ganga or whoever had this thought, because government has announced, but now the financial authorities, or the supply chain of that money, I would call it, right? The loan sanction, how easy it can be for the farmer. Those are the points that we need to probably discuss and stress more upon. Ganga, any thought?
Yeah, sure. Actually, see, I mean, this just cuts beyond the data discussion alone, right? It's got to do with
Yes.
credit assessment. It's got to do with dispersal. It's got to do with knowledge at the receiving end. And it's got to do with the value proposition of MSMEs or agriculture, as Venki mentioned.
Right.
See, it's like, I mean, there is a lot of data, but still it doesn't mean an MSME can compete with a Bosch or a WAPCO or a ABB or a Siemens in terms of technology. It just can't. It can possibly collaborate in manufacturing. Same thing, in agri, we have, suppose a MSME or somebody in agri is actually manufacturing pesticides. It's not a competition to Bayer. So the creme de la creme don't need the money. And that's a kind of customers which banks want. Yeah, those who actually don't need the money. So if somebody wants to invest in an iffy case, then it becomes almost venture capital, and banks are very good at that. So there are a lot of funds. I know that the funds are also going on, but the number of MSMEs and the scale in which they operate, it's just far too much. I mean, Sagar mentioned about a number in manufacturing going bust. If the OEMs, like say a Maruti or a Hero, have got problems, then backward integration, the entire supply chain which they have created and which are completely dependent on these, what's the fate of these? See, they suffer. So I mean, so it's got to do with business. And banking is not the easiest part. Sanjeev, is lending. Easiest part. The most difficult part is recovery. So yes, if government mandates that there is a certain amount to be lent, it will be. But I guess MSMEs needs to be competitive, and here is where possibly data can be an enabler, for them to focus on it. Not data alone, but data will help. I mean, what is the USP? How do they operate? What is their support systems? All these things need to come into play. So, I mean, there's a lot. And you also mentioned about data for us. See, data is available. It just needs to be, I mean, somebody asked this question on the LinkedIn about domain-based data. That's so true, Like, how exactly do we build data models? For banks to actually improve their lending, everybody needs to have the same definition of what a data is. Not corporate different from trade finance, different from treasury. They need to understand the data. They need to understand actually kind of who's that corporate and what is the requirement. All that stuff, there needs to be a consistency. And that's a challenge. Some banks do it better than others. And most of the banks focus on, as we discussed, about low-hanging fruit. So my point is, yes, MSMEs, agri, manufacturing all need money. Yes, but they are in a stage of the cyclical slowdown wherein, if a customer is not really willing to buy the products, then banks actually putting in money, does it actually become a rational decision? And what is a better way? It becomes, this almost becomes a policy discussion beyond just yes, data can be an enabler, no doubt. It will help banks reach the most, kind of suffering MSMEs and give money to them. But is it what, in a bank, public sector bank maybe, government maybe, but a bank otherwise doesn't look forward to the day wherein it caters to the most kind of deserving customer. It goes to the customer which actually possibly gives back the money along with interest in due course. So there are these conflicts out there. And MSMEs, manufacturing, agri, and everybody else can do a lot with the right data sets. Something
That's
allow
a
them
great point.
to their core competencies. Yeah.
That's a great point where I know it's not probably sounding human to me at this moment if I just heard it, but it looks like it's a reality because it is coming from horse's mouth here, that a bank would always want to lend money who really can pay rather than who really deserve to be getting that loan and get their work done, or maybe whatever situation they are. Yeah, I mean, maybe agricultural farmer or maybe MSME who's probably dying and they really need that money and to revive themselves and all of those aspects, right? So that's a great way of looking at it. But don't you think if we are into a cyclic slowdown, as we all know, because of this pandemic specifically, uh, it is a time to, in fact, it is a good time to go look back and see what all we are not paying attention, and try to put all those due diligence in place and see where all we can probably improve, maybe cut certain things short, add certain measures that we were not taking. So I'm coming from that angle. I know there can be a situation where we can't just move, but then there is always a possibility if you want to. So that's where the whole thought process that yes, we are stuck, but how can we make sure that we are doing and putting all those effort to make ourselves unstuck? That's the whole thought and idea, and that's where I think I'm very bullish about the fact that data can help, but like Venki said, right? Data alone is not enough. Data in what context, in what situation, circumstances, it changes from for me and for Venki or for say Vidyasagar, it is different for me because my situation and my context might be just different, and it may be a goal to me, but it may be garbage to somebody else, right? So that's where we have to do those due diligence and make use of that. So I think from the perspective of data, right, I would like to go back to Soumya, uh, who is like worked for data with many big customers and then manufacturing and garment. What are your thoughts on very high level, Soumya, with all those conversations that you heard?
Yeah, sorry, Sanjeev, can I just make one small clarification? Soumya, 30 seconds, please. Sure, sure. The idea is
Yeah,
like,
go ahead, sir.
kind of, it's not about kind of, portraying a financial institution in a particular way. My point is trying to highlight one, the reality. Second, yes, you can infuse more and more capital. I mean, PSUs get capital. But what I'm trying to say, efficiency is the only winner. So if to the extent that data can be an enabler of efficiency and effectiveness, I think as was mentioned, that is the only way in which it can be sustainable. Otherwise, it's a one-time effort waiting for the next effort, to happen. So that's what is the point. It's like it needs to be sustained. To that, and I've seen companies use data very well there, and those are the ones who come from the micro MSMEs. They actually graduate to MSMEs, improve their competitive advantage. I just thought I'll just clarify on that.
Well, you're good there. I mean, if you see that the comment from one of our person who is like very active and trying to give the thought, it is ungoverned, it is unmassaged, it is there is no human intervention. We are just collecting. And Venki rightly said, right? It is not about collecting it. I mean, are we using it? And that's where this whole and that's what I was really going there. We can create a dump of data, and it can be a massive rabbit hole, but how can we make sure that we only pick those pieces which is going to be immediately giving me benefit and not worry about boiling the ocean, which Uni Krishnan earlier said, right? That's the whole idea. I think we are not having Uni Krishnan at this moment video, but yeah, I was just remembering this thought there. So Soumya, you want to just quickly comment on that, and then we will go to the agriculture, because this comment from the user, I want to really get clarification or some thought from Venki.
Definitely. No. So the way I see that, right? So I know we were talking about finance data, we are talking about agriculture, and again, we are trying to connect everything into Atmanirbhar Bharat just to make sure how can we take advantage of the data what we have as of today. Now, a lot of you here, our panelists, has spoke about how we can intelligently take decisions out of data or make that small companies into bigger companies, right? Now, if you go back and look at the history, the monopolies or the bigger companies who are out there right now, their decisions over the period of time they have taken is all based on the data.
Yeah.
Now, if you see their structure of decision making, or how they have organized their unstructured data, there's a lot of junk available. And if you can refine the junk out of what you really want, then yes, you can certainly go out and take a decision. Now, based on my experience, yes, I I have not worked in the agricultural space, but I certainly did work in the BFSI, healthcare, a lot lately in the pharmaceutical space. We're doing a lot of research, with COVID, and some in the defense side, to making sure that we have the right data and we know what is actually coming, and we are refining the data out, right? So that's where I personally believe, whether irrespective of any industry we are in, if we can understand first of all what is important for us, and then again I'll go back to Venki's point earlier, right? Defining the data. If you at an enterprise level, if you can define what is necessary and important for you, and if you can build a model like I think Mr. Mahesh, one of our audience, was keep commenting on that particular point, right?
Yeah.
So if you can
Yeah.
build a model that is sustainable for your enterprise, and if you can start governing your data by having the right stewards in place, that is what helps enterprises on a longer run. So that you are governing your data by the right people at the right time. So that is helping enterprises to take the right decisions in a longer run.
So, Venki, is there an issue really in the sector? I mean, is it really unstructured where a lot of data uh, not really used to the benefit? Is this a notion, right? I mean, as per the comment below.
Sure. I'll explain. I'll share my perspective. So, I mean, this has to be the rare conference where we have not even used once the word data as a new oil. So I'm very happy that way.
Yeah.
But the other thing
I
that
don't like that personally.
yeah. So I mean, it is very, very problematic. So that way, I'm very happy that we've not spoken. But the reason why I'm bringing that point is it is another important common presumption or common understanding that needs to be debunked is, if I were to state it in one line, the idea that raw data is an oxymoronic statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't say that there is. I mean, you can't talk about data that you will say there is strictly it is without any human intervention. Any data, there is no such thing as raw data in the first place. So any data, even if it's coming via from your any systems, the way we are structuring it, the way we are adding our judgments and our interpretations, that's going to influence it. So that said, definitely in agriculture, a lot of data is completely unreliable. So you have to look at the production data of what the government releases in 2016. If you look at the wheat data that they announced, and easily you can see the difference in terms of what data government is releasing, and then if you see the private data, and then if you see the actual output, it's oftentimes the private data is far more closer to the output. So a lot of data is very, very problematic in Indian agriculture. And if you go down to details and you understand the ontology, I think we talked about models. I think the fundamental aspect here is I in the consulting work that I do, I spend a lot of time on ontology. And ontology is a very, very crucial subject that needs to be understood in terms of how are we defining it and what ways we are adding categorizing different definitions and adding our own repository here. In agriculture, there has been a lot of work happening right now in the large agriculture players in terms of standardizing the definitions and references there. So and ontology plays a very huge role, and I think we need to bring in some of these fundamentals in place to minimize some of these pointers that Mahesh has been pointing out here. So definitely the data is big and has a lot of challenges, but we have to go back to the fundamentals.
Just to add on that, if you guys are okay with that. So I certainly echo what you have just mentioned, Venki, but at the same time, it is not like the way Mahesh has mentioned, right? So from the data dumps, if we can build an AI-based, a cataloging tool, for example, right? So that will go and fetches you the information. It scans all your sources and brings the data in. That's when the human intervention will come into the play, where then, yes, you go ahead and play around. Now you have all the unstructured way of having the data, and you scanned it, and based on the business rules you write, and so you're pulling the right information out. Now still someone has to tell us, is this the information right? And then are we governing it in the right way? So that's where probably the human intervention will come in. But long story short, if we can build it using the AI and machine learning concepts, and you can go ahead and pull the information out upfront proactively, and then bring your right people in, that's when the human intervention. So it's always hand in hand. It's just not the machines. Yes, your humans has to support it, vice versa, humans build the machines, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think basically it's the people perspective that I keep talking, right? So people, you can have an excellent technology, you can have great process, but if you have not aligned the people to all of those two things correctly, then you're gonna most probably fail most of the time. And that's where this in our world we call it data stewards, right? So data stewardship, having those review process in place, having those people looking at things and trying to give the right definition, making sure that it is going always in control. Obviously, there can be automation in place, but the people aspect is very important to make sure that things are really in line with what we want. That's a really a great point. Uni, you have been really listening. I know because you said the context, and we are just driving that on the same context. But what are your overall observation so far on this?
I think quite a bit of good point is good discussed, and a kind of dichotomy of sorts that we have been discussing this for the last 15, 20 years actually, right? I mean, a lot of things that we discuss are not new. It's been around for a while. Now, for instance, I think the point is about data versus noise, and we all know a lot of this that we're gathering is noise. So for instance, 4-5 years ago, and then I've been in this industry where we've been talking multiple customers around the same thing: is you bring all data together. And there's a lot of fancy terminologies for that, right? In the hypes around data lakes and so on and so forth. And some magic will happen, and then I'll get the insights. And no magic happened. Nothing happened. It continued. But the difference I see is in terms of what technology can now bring in. And I believe the earlier speaker did mention about is the ability to, say, classify the data today, a lot more machine driven. I think we need to definitely pick that threads going forward, because a lot of the problems are same. It's not going to change overnight, but we have the ability to go do the tiering of the data today. At least try to glean through the data a lot faster and say these are the possible. There's a human intervention to make it happen. It has to be there. I don't think without a man in the loop, this is going to work through. But there is that ability to do that today, and that's what we should really hit hard at this point in time. Data standardization, defining an ontology, I think it's a great idea, but then, and it's worked in certain areas, but the challenge is the acceptance across the board. How many would accept it? Is there a consistent definition that I can bring in? We've been talking about simple thing as customer being represented in 3 or 4 different formats. Yep. How does that come together? And this is something 20 years ago we heard it, and nothing has changed significantly there. But I think the difference is what technology can bring in right now, at least to level play the field, to give a little more information, more broader information. AI can help it. I think we have seen it happening. So this is no more filibuster around AI, but I think we got to be hype conscious also here. It can help. It is helping. You need to define a proper construct around it. It is happening. So if you can do that kind of a tiering, if you can bring those, try to segregate the noise versus data, at least give that information for somebody to make a meaningful decision on top of it, the human intervention, that would help. And that's what I strongly believe, that technology can play, but not use technology for sake of technology, that you build it around it and say, oh, yeah, this would make a difference, and that hasn't. Meaningfully looking at data from technology-driven decisions or insights, that would make a huge impact in my view. And we should, whether it is, and I don't want to broad brush it and say that it's applicable in large corporations versus MSMEs, right? I mean, you need to be cautious about that difference out there. But it can make an impact, and we should look at it from that perspective also. And that's a difference I think we're talking in 2020.
Right. Absolutely. I think things have really changed. People have started looking at new ways. The new normal has been already created. Many things that we thought is not possible seems to be really possible. I mean, see ourselves, we have been really successfully working from home for like 4 months now. And we never thought that it would work. and then many businesses are operating. Many people have really transformed their way of thinking and doing business already. So this is really opening up, and that's where this one term which caught my attention, and I'll just throw it up, and we will also try to summarize this whole discussion as well, so that we can get to one more topic that we have left for the day, and then we'll take it from there. Data business is something that I was reading, and I'm doing this series also every week where I talk about this non-personal data governance. So data business has come as a keyword here. If you ask me, it is nothing but in a way saying that how can you monetize data that only you brought in the very beginning itself, right? So, and they are seeing it as one of the biggest enabler that can really help either create a new possibility or enhance the possibility, or enhance the reality that is already existing. So those kind of expectation that we have from there, that kind of model that government is proposing. So anyone, any thought on data as business? It's a new thing. I have coined this data as business, but yeah, I think government is talking about it, and then I thought I'll bring that topic here, and then we'll go and try to summarize this whole conversation together and see if we can take some 2 or 3 takeaways of this. So anyone, or maybe only you want to kick us off?
I can maybe add some perspective from an agriculture standpoint.
Yeah, please.
So in agriculture right now, there's an entirely a standards board which is called Ag Data Transparent, which has put together a series of data standards that will define that how farmers can own their data, and then defining how the technology providers have to how technology providers can either access the data, and then it goes through the entire data life cycle, right? From can they access data and what ways they can re-license it, and what will be the end, how the data will be expired, all of that. So the entire life cycle has been well managed there, but sadly there are, if you look at the amount of startups that are there and the amount of startups who have signed in the Ag Data Transparent code, it's about 40 plus numbers. The most recent I saw, and there have been not my fundamental view is, as an individual who is creating the data, he should have the ability to monetize. But again, monetization is just one small part of the entire data ecosystem. Because see, let's understand this at a fundamental level. My data is valuable when it's placed in a context that is outside me, right? So, and that's what the fundamental term property we use called data as a non-rivalrous good, right? So today, if I use oil, somebody I am losing, somebody else may not use that oil. But whereas if I'm using the data, somebody else can use that data. It's a non-rivalrous good, right? So in that case, we need to understand this aspect and then see what kind of monetization properties are possible, and then that's a way forward. I think. In understanding this non-rivalrous nature is a very crucial aspect here.
This is a huge topic. In fact, it can also become one more session, extracting value out of data. I think only in your day-to-day, you must be facing this every time, because this is a buzzword nowadays. Everybody wants that. Nobody knows that how to do
it. And I think I would rather put 2 probing pointers back to it, and I think it's everybody still figuring it out. So one is all about data ownership. I think who owns the data here now, and the point of data versus insights. Now, this is a very interesting thing that is emerging really. So, for instance, if I get the data and I know who I got it from, and he or she is the owner of the data, what about the insights that has come in now? Who owns that insight? You derive some intelligence out of it. Now, a corollary to that is, so there's a lot of talk about consent-driven data management. That's what I was bringing in the beginning, saying that you need to have a consent while you take the data. So consent means you should also have the ability to revoke the consent at any point in time.
Yeah.
What happens if I revoke the consent? I can handle the data, but what about the insights I've already generated out of it? See, this is a very, very debate topic, right? I mean, I could just now cannot go back and say that, hey, you provided the data, you revoke it. I can't just not change insights. I don't know where and all it has gone out. See, so the data ownership and the differentiation between data versus insight, especially in a consent-driven model, I think it needs an ombudsman kind of a model, more like what capital market does. You'll start thinking in that direction. It's not very well evolved. I think I'm sure a lot of debates going on in it, but that's an area to me very, very important from a data monetization angle. It needs to be defined ownership. Otherwise, I can get an aggregate and then I can create more value out of it. What does that mean? Am I transferring in a typical IP context where I transfer the royalty back? Am I going to do that? How do I do that? These are definitely a topic of huge discussions and possibilities going forward.
And that is where this data economy, that keyword that also flashes when you search internet, that we have to start thinking data in the context of the economy, like we treat really money, right? I know Venki would say that we started comparing data with money and all and all whatnot. But why I brought that point is that like we deal our finances, like we deal our money, like we invest and really be careful about whether I'm making a profit or a loss, and all those other aspect of finances, which Ganga really understand better. We need to treat data in a similar fashion from the start to end. So there has to be a real life cycle management for the entire data, and at what stage it is creating what value, and can we monetize that. It's a huge subject, as I rightly you rightly mentioned, and I was telling that there can be a new topic altogether when we discuss that. But for the time being in the context of what we are trying to discuss, shall we not go ahead, around the table one by one, and just take one sentence or maybe a liner that you took away of this call, and we can conclude that after this call to the user that you're listening to us. So only from you will start, because you kicked us off. You started us, and then I want you to go back, and then we'll come around the table and take thoughts.
Right. So my thoughts, I would summarize saying that I think everybody recognize the value of data, but at the same time, it's very fundamental. We need to define the data boundaries. I don't think that's been handled very well. So one takeaway that I would say is that how do you define those data boundaries? And this cannot be done as a broad brushing. It has to be in industry specific definitions. So the data boundaries and the industry context is very, very important for us to move forward. And second is also in the same breath, I would say data versus noise differentiation. I think it's not a dearth of data. There's proliferation of data out here. It's to segment between what's noise and what's data, and easy said than done. And the corollary is that leveraging some of the technology, and I'm just wearing that hat to say that we should leverage some of the emerging technology patterns to figure that out, and we should not shy off from that.
Yeah. Soumya.
Sorry. So, that's a very, very good point. No, thank you for mentioning that. But just to add on that, so my points are to make sure when we collect the data and when we start maintaining and managing them, so the sources needs to be, of course, has to be appropriately identified. And if we can build a system or a mechanism or a framework, let me put it that way, which is specific to that industry, which can go in and fetch the data proactively for you for your own better decision making, whether that is agriculture, banking, or finance, wherever you take. So we already have some in place, but I believe within our domestic businesses, if we can build a framework or a process which help enterprises to foresee what's coming and take a better decisions based on the history of their own data. I think that is something which enables us to go towards a data-driven world.
Perfect. Ganga, quickly your thought. Summarize.
Yeah, sure. Basically, right, takeaways, and also something which I also wanted to summarize is it should not be viewed in isolation. Data, I mean, there's a governance, policy, process, framework. There are lots of suffixes and prefixes actually assigned. But how is it that data can actually collaborate with others in the ecosystem to add value? So that is something which I have been trying, in my role, both in banking tech, and I continue to do that. And that's where I guess there's a lot of journey to traverse.
Yep. Data augmentation is what I think I can summarize that rightly. Thanks, Ganga. Great insight. Yep. Augmenting that data with the right.
Enrichment, collaborate with other parts of the ecosystem. Yeah.
Perfect. Sagar, you are on mute, Sagar, if you're speaking.
Yeah. So my takeaway, I would revolve it around the MSME. I would say that data is very important for MSME, and data should be collected, data should be defined in the right way to ensure that productivity is achieved using the right data, and the most important is banks are going to give you loan based on your credibility and not
Wow,
your
that's
desirability.
awesome. Great. Vidyasagar.
Yeah, sure, Sanjeev. See, one point, I will try to act like a social scientist here rather than a techie. See, one thing, what has happened with our constitution is the founding fathers of the constitution have put both duties and rights in the constitution. But later, I think in the regime of late Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, fundamental duties have been taken out as a mandatory thing from the constitution, and that mindset is there in all the people in subconscious level, may not be at the people educated level, but then because of that ecosystem and the aura that is created, people don't care about the responsibility or the duty you have. You as an individual have a duty towards how you safeguard data. Whenever we install an app or something, right, it will ask for some confirmation. We just want to use the app and we don't really look at the fine print and other things. So definitely you have a role to play. So I think that mindset of duties and responsibilities, rights, you have right, but you have duty towards yourself and towards the nation on what you need to do. I think that is very important.
Awesome. So that reminds me of one of my campaign that I ran. I mean, obviously single-handedly that time because nobody probably talks about that topic. And to me, it is not controversial. Data privacy is very important. So I ran this and I call this "Know Your Data Duty" and "Know Your Data Rights." And there's a hashtag also there. And I ran this very successfully. And it was like, I echo with Vidyasagar on that. So thank you, Vidyasagar, for reminding me of that. So Jess.
Yeah, sure. So one comment what I have is basically data is definitely crucial and important. And I think we are discussing how this data can be shared. But basically, my thought is even if data is with the respective sector, right? So, for example, it could be with the government or any of the enterprise organizations, but how could it further help to the emerging industries? So my thought here is let the ownership be with the respective organization, but provide a facility where when a small scale industry is coming up and asking, I want to infer something from your data, right? So take those inputs and work on your existing data and you governs everything, but provide as a mechanism and your analytics back to the consumer saying that this is what we can interpret from there, right? I mean, it's similar to how we are having infrastructure as a service or business as a service. Now provide intelligence or data as a service for the consumers, right? So that probably is one part.
Great, great. In fact, I think data sharing, data democratization, just to summarize that piece. Yep. Finally, Venki, and your agri-business matters. I like that. Yeah. Please share
So
your thoughts and we'll.
primarily all the systems that we have built so far, be it the political systems or the economical systems or the social systems, were built in an age of data scarcity. Now, as we move into an age of data abundance, we need to reconfigure these systems of economy, of political systems, and of social systems to configure them and to make the most of the current climate. Because just because our technology systems are are evolved to the 21st century, our legal systems are still in the 19th and 20th century, right? So all of these other systems, legal systems, political systems, and our market distribution systems, the way market assigns value, the way market assigns price, all of these systems have to be reinvented, and that is where I think the need of the hour.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great, great thought. I think so. Lastly, I think as a person who facilitated this, for me it is most rewarding. Reason being that I could learn from all of you. I have taken some notes, but I do have my thought and passion across this whole domain as I deal with this day in day out as a part of my personal initiative as well as obviously my day job to run my family. But to me, it is always start from the people. Like I would echo with Vidyasagar. I am a huge promoter of the people first, and then process, and then technology. And I know most of you will do that, but to me, simple is still the best. So I do not talk about lot of other frameworks that is available, because they are there. But if you really look at those very closely, you might see that there are traces of some simplicity out there, and they have evolved because there was some simple thing in place already. So I recommend and I follow that you take the ownership of your data, own that, and try to treat it as if you are treating your money, and be responsible about it, care for it, and then see how and what kind of value you're getting from it. There will always be abundance of data. I am not trying to solve that problem. We are not trying to solve the problem of abundance. We are trying to solve the problem that between that abundance, where is the value? And are we able to sincerely or carefully able to extract those value and take it and provide benefit to the either your end user or your employee or your team member or whoever, right? So I think with that thought, I would like to conclude this panel discussion, and thank you everyone for your suggestion. And then the next topic that we have is very, I would say, revolutionary is what I would say, because it is not there already. It's just that Vidya Sagar put a lot of effort in proposing that concept, which might eventually benefit our self-reliant vision, where we want to produce locally and think globally as well. So Vidya Sagar, over to you for your presentation. I will flash his slide over here, and he would just go and talk about it very quickly, and then we'll conclude it finally.
Sure. Thanks, Sanjeev.
Okay.
Yeah. So this model that I'm proposing is still in the works, but there are bits and pieces of this model which are really active. And Sagar, I would say that you can ignore the word smart. So the concept of microfactory also will be very relevant to what I am talking about. So next one, Sanjeev. Yeah. So the motivation for this model is fourfold actually. The first thing is, in the last 30 years, heavy globalization, the supply chain moved to a very, very centralized structure because of the economies of scale. And it has taken a toll on the Earth's ecosystem, which we are facing. And that is one. And second thing is, as a thought leader, World Economic Forum also is saying that the future of manufacturing lies in distributed manufacturing. So that's the first dimension. The second is, there was a notion in the earlier manufacturing era telling that economy of scale only will help reduce the cost. But Industry 4.0 paradigm has shown that hyper personalization is possible even at very low scale. You can create a customized product for a single customer at the same cost. And then the next dimension is the supply chain disruption. This we have only seen in the last 6 months, where COVID has disrupted all of us. And at least from my experience, I could see these three scenarios which were there. So first is, the companies had a lot of their products, but it could not reach the end customer due to supply chain problems. They wanted to produce, but manpower was not there. We have seen post-lockdown, unlockdown, the laborers cannot travel back. And the third is, we have seen that demand for certain products has reduced, and certain things has increased. So, for example, because everybody is staying at home, confectionery companies like Britannia and other things, and Parley, they have seen their lifetime high demand for products like biscuits and other things. And the way we have built our manufacturing, we cannot scale overnight. So that is another point as a motivation. And the fourth thing which we should not ignore and we cannot is, our father of nation, he was talking about a village-centric, self-contained economy. So that was the motivation for this model. And of course, like all of you, being a patriotic Indian, I want my country to be in top of the League of Nations for manufacturing. So that's the last influence. So let us look at the components of the smart factory. Moving on to that definition, Sanjeev.
Yep.
Yeah. So here I will just give a definition of a micro factory and a smart factory. The micro factory definition has been around since about 30 years. It was conceptualized by a professor in Japan with a regular manufacturing setup. So you can set up a small factory within just 100 square meters area. And then if you add smart, which is coming from the digital transformation and all the other advanced manufacturing technologies like the 3D printing and other things. So if you put that, that's what is a smart micro factory. And the advantages of this smart micro factory, if I may coin this word, factory form factor, taking from the device form factors. So if you have a small factory, it is easy and faster to actually start innovating and producing. In fact, GE Appliances has built an innovation lab to do rapid prototyping, and they have done an experiment with a micro factory versus a normal setup and proved that micro factory was able to bring products up to the market very fast. And I also want to give few success stories. There are many success stories, just a few of them. The first thing is during the peak COVID scenario in Switzerland, they have set up a factory to manufacture the face masks in just a small container. So containers which are used for transport, right? That's where entire factory was there actually. And the second one is about a digital textile factory. Unfortunately, I think we missed the sequence. Sanjeev, if you can play the video after this, it will help
Yes.
helpful. Yeah.
Yes.
So it will help actually manufacture the entire garment and also stitch it in a quick manner, and it can be set up in a very small area. We'll have a 1.5 minute video after this. And then the third example is in the University of Southwest Australia, an Indian scientist who was a professor there, she has actually created a model of a e-waste micro factory where they take laptops and mobile phones, which is a increasing e-waste menace. They separate it into the different components and remove the metal from even the printed circuit boards. And then because there are a lot of rare earths materials which are there, they are very costly to mine. You can as well recycle and reduce some impact on the mother earth. Moving on to the other elements. So what I see as a components of a micro factory, smart micro factory is there are three elements. The first thing is the core design and manufacturing part. So it could be either with the smart or not even smart, whatever it is. And then the second component is a visual management system, where you have the advanced technologies like AR, VR, and all the visual technologies we are using. And then you can actually look at whatever happening in the micro factory from a governance perspective, dashboards and other things. And the people who are at the factory, in case they need some help, they can actually talk to the other experts through the AR, VR and the video conferencing facilities, get help. They can let the expert see what is happening on the shop floor from a remote area and then provide the feedback. And then, of course, the architecture part. So essentially, it's all based on a cloud, and you have the providers and the consumers and the different functions of that, which are participating in the cloud, and then you can have a software as a service model. You don't need to buy, just have a subscription model to build that. So that's the whole concept of a smart micro factory, as I see. So there are, moving on, there are different business models and limitations to what I'm proposing. So at least, as I said, it's still in a conceptual stage. Two types of business models I see for a smart factory. The first thing is a large manufacturing organization. I was giving the example of like a Britannia and Parle-G. So they could have set up a biscuit manufacturing plant within a small district of a country, and within the district there is no restriction on travel. So they could have delivered the products doing that. That's an example. There could be other products. It could be masks or anything. So that is one. And then what happens is that can become a contract-based manufacture. And since what is the motivation to the companies is they have a risk mitigated manufacturing, because you are going into distributed manufacturing instead of centralized manufacturing. And then that eventually helps in reducing the supply chain risk we have seen in COVID-like scenarios. And then this standalone factory. So any entrepreneur can set up a factory on their own for any kind of things. So for example, they can produce garments or anything using local talent, local designs and other things. No? You can actually create the entire cloth design. Just take the cotton and create the garment, print the design and cut into a shape or anything and do that. So coming to the limitations, this model especially is suitable for manufacturing where it is assembly kind of things, not suitable for continuous manufacturing. At least there are no examples. One is because of the kind of process and the safety requirements. Since micro factory, as I said, smart micro factory is based on a highly automated thing, it may not give massive employment, but in a country like India, there is a potential for thousands of micro factories, and we can get lakhs in employment. And of course, as we have seen in the case of agriculture rights, if there is no regulation, there will be a glut in the market in once, and then there will be a shortage of products. So we need a regulated manufacturing model which can help build the right model. And all the examples that we have, I have talked about earlier, are outside of India. But they are available at lower cost. But taking the Make in India model, we can also look at how to create such models. There is some good amount of work being done in the academics within India. I've seen a paper from PSG College of Technology where they created small lathes, actually very small lathe, which can be held in your hand and other things. So that's there. Just quickly to the next two slides, we will. Yeah. So these are the different stakeholders in this model and what each stakeholder has to do. Just a quick view, and then we'll move to the next slide because we are just getting on to the time. Next slide, please. So I have laid out a benefits matrix based on the UN Sustainable Development Goals framework. There are 17 sustainable development goals. So I have marked how this model will be helpful for each of these. In some areas, it is not even relevant. In some areas, if you look from 8 to 13 onwards is where they have a decent impact. So that's what is the model about. Again, like same shoe cannot fit every foot. This is a different kind of intervention we are proposing to overcome some of the limitations that we have seen in the recent past. Yeah, thank you. Jai Hind.
Perfect. So this is great. I think you touched upon a key topic. I would say the reason which we stated earlier, that the whole idea is that how we can become self-reliant. And then if you go by the definition of self-reliant India, what is the meaning of self-reliant? It is basically if we can have goods and services produced locally, and it's not only production, it's basically, are we also producing some surplus so that we can also export it and get the right amount of foreign exchange so that we can import some of the things that we cannot produce. So the overall definition of self-reliant is not only being conservative, putting everything into control and not doing the foreign trade and all. It's not that. Basically, the whole idea is that how we can do meaningful stuff locally, know our strength, but wherever we are not good at, we have to be open to import and keep on those foreign exchange flowing. So that's the whole idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat, as per definition of Government of India, if you can see. So with that thought, I think this is a time to really conclude the overall event, and I wanted to really thank all of you personally for this opportunity that we are having here to go openly and then talk about your thought. What do you think about it? Yes, we have not found a solution as such, but we have done lot of stirring so that there are good conversation that can happen on top of it. So we have basically set a stage from where a lot of things can happen. We can do a lot more conversation going forward as well. So also I want to thank Vidyasagar specifically because he has brought in people and organization to support this JNTU in this case, and also AE Enterprise Architecture Association as well, which is chaired by one of our panelists, Jess Kiran as well. So thank you both of you for all those coordination and help in bringing the right people for the right kind of a discussion that we have had today. Any parting thought, anybody, before we close?
Sanjeev, I think this is a very great panel, and thank you for facilitating it, making sure it is successful.
Thanks. Uni, before we close, just conclude that for us.
No, I think thanks, Sanjeev. I think it's well orchestrated one. I think we have I enjoyed it. Pretty good discussion, different viewpoints. And I'm sure it kind of bring stage for follow-on conversation. In any way, not everything is expected to solve in a 2-hour discussion. So we would have further food for thought from these. And I thought pointers are well narrated. So a lot more to focus on and take it through. From your vantage point, probably further conversations around.
Thank you. Thanks, Uni. Thank you, Soumya. Thank you, Ganga. Thanks, Sagar, Vidya, and Jess for joining this. And I loved all of those conversations. A lot of notes I have taken, which I will publish, and then we can take it from there. So with that, I wanted to thank all of you who are watching Data Ki Baat today. And I hope you liked Atmanirbhar with data concept. And there is a lot that we can discuss and take in future. So thank you very much, and thanks for your time today. Happy Independence Day.
Happy Independence